actually do. But, that was very cool. But I remember that show, Name That Tune, and it got me, I thought of that as I was prepping for what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes. And if you have your Bibles, you can open up to Exodus 3. But what I want us to do is to talk about how we can name God in 4 letters. Can you name God in 4 letters? And when we talk about naming God, some of you are like, well, you've already said his name, God, and that's in 3 letters. There, I beat you. There's only 3. But actually, God isn't God's name. God is who he is. It's like if anyone here has a name tag that says human being, that's not really saying your name, is it? That's saying who you are, I'm assuming. Unless we have aliens among us or something like that. But your name tag doesn't say human being, it has your name on it. So if God were here, he wouldn't have a name tag that says God. He would have a name tag that actually has his name on it. What is God's name in 4 letters?
4 letters.
Yeah? Well, we sang about several attributes of God, and there are an endless number of attributes that we can correlate with God. But the scriptures tell us, like love, we talked about him being our strength and our refuge and our fortress, but that's not really his name. I still don't think he would put fortress on his name tag if he were here, okay? So what is it that he would put on his name tag? And that's what I want us to look at in Exodus 3. And as we're going to start off, I'm just going to give you a heads up. We're going to start off in verse 1. For those of you that are running the slides, we're going to go 1 through 6, and then we'll jump down to verse 13. So there's this guy named Moses. He was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side, I think it was the 97th west side, of the wilderness, and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. In other words, what just took place there is Moses pressed the pause button, if you were here a couple of weeks ago. In the midst of his workday, in the midst of all of his responsibilities, he sensed that he needed to slow down and pay attention and notice something. And this is what's taking place. He presses the pause button. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So here's this sacred encounter. And one of the things that I love about this is it doesn't begin by saying in verse 1, now Moses showed up early for church, and as he was sitting there in the pew, this was just kind of in the midst of what was another day. That 40 years he has spent out here in the wilderness tending the sheep of his father-in-law Jethro. And Jethro Clampett, as I believe his name was. And you guys aren't old enough to remember that either, are you? Goodness sakes. I need some water and Metamucil. But here's the deal. He spent 40 years just kind of going through the motions with this job. And then he has this moment where God just kind of splits back time and says, if Moses is willing to pay attention, I want to get his attention to talk to him about something very special. Moses is willing to press pause. And the Lord, God, begins to introduce himself. And he says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face and he was afraid to look at God. In other words, this was a big deal. This was a major ordeal. Verse 13, then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel, and by this point of the story, God has just told Moses, I want you to go and set my people free. Moses said to God, if I go to those people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Okay, let me stop right there. For those of you that have read this passage, does that confuse you like it does me? Are you expecting it's I am, Sam I am, I eat green eggs and ham, I am, Sam I am, or something like that? I'm like, what is this going on? He goes Seuss on us all of a sudden. And what does that mean when he says, I am? I am who I am. What is taking place at this point? Verse 15. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord. Do you see how Lord is spelled out? You ever notice in your Bibles that sometimes the word Lord, even if the O-R and D is smaller than the L, it's still a capital O, a capital R, and a capital D? Anybody ever notice that? Okay? That is actually our translation of this name, I am who I am. I am. The Lord, that's what he would put on his name tag, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. The word Lord, when it's spelled in all capital letters there, is a way that it stands for the divine name, Yahweh. And I think somebody or several somebodies of you said that earlier. If God had a name, what would he put on there? And for whoever said it, we don't have an iTunes gift card for you, but thank you for playing. But here's, 2 weeks ago we talked about this. It's YHWH is how it was spelled in the Hebrew. The Hebrew language does not use vowels, so there's some uncertainty as to how actually you would pronounce this this name. But if you were to spell it, to transliterate it, in other words, to use the Hebrew letters and use English-sounding translations, these are the four letters of Yahweh. The Yod, He, Vav, He. It's H-E, but it would be like it rhymes with say or something like that. And so we have this Yod, He, Vav, He, and this is the name that represents I am. I am that I am. This is God basically saying, this is my essence. I am self-existent, and I exist completely in and of myself. I am. And I don't need any other. I am. And this was such a revered name. This was so holy that it would only be spelled. It would not be spoken by the people of that day. And still today, an Orthodox Jew will not say or spell the name of God without leaving a letter out. But this Yod He Vav He is the way it was written. Now it was originally written right to left, and so we would kind of think of it left to right. But here it's just a column so that we can kind of see what they are. This self-existent one, I'm going to try and hang with me on this, but I'm going to try to kind of explain what this I am phrase means. And this is very much, I am in process with this myself, but to say, when God says that he is, when God says that he is self-existent, that everything exists within himself and he doesn't need anything else to exist, most everything that you and I would know of has an opposite to it. If we were to pull out a coin, it would have heads and tails. Can you have a coin that only has one or the other? Not really. I mean, yeah, you can put the same image on the other, but you can't have a one-sided coin. It's impossible. Okay? So what God is saying here is, I am heads, but there are no tails. So if that kind of jacks with your mind just a little bit, that's kind of where I'm trying to describe this. And this is why I'm having such a hard time. How do you describe what God is when there is no real opposite of that? And you kind of think of it, and this might be a better description. Think of God as light. And what is the opposite of light? Darkness. Yeah, that wasn't a trick question. So the opposite of the opposite of light is dark, sort of. Because if we were to walk out of this room and flip the switch, the lights go out, so the bulb is no longer emanating the photons that make light. Instead of that, does that light bulb all of a sudden begin to emanate darkness? Are you turning on the darkness as you turn off the light? The answer is no. It's not a trick question again. And so really, I don't know that it's the opposite. Darkness is maybe the opposite, but it's more like darkness is simply the absence of light. As long as there is light, there's going to be an absence of darkness. But if you take all of the photons away, you take all of the light away, then you are left with darkness. And there's a way that they can measure darkness. There's like a 0 point where it gets so dark it can't get any darker. But the thing about light is that it has no end. It can always be a little bit brighter, and a little bit brighter, and a little bit brighter. And so what God is saying to us, He is saying that I am light. And in me there is no darkness. What God is saying is, I exist completely in and of completely by myself. I am not dependent on anything else for me to have life. I am the self-existent one. And Moses, I want you to tell them that the self-existent one, the Yod He Vav He, the I am, has sent you. And he begins to take off his shoes. He's like, okay, this is big. This is huge. And so this picture that we have, this beginning to form of Yahweh, is one that we're realizing is now.